Eating out is expensive, y'all, and we've all found ourselves in those situations where we want to make something special for someone. This meal is a showstopper, and it's super easy to prepare. It's sashimi grade tuna cooked rare with sushi rice and mango salsa. It's super bright and fresh, and here are your ingredients. For this tuna and the sushi rice, you're going to want 1 sashimi grade tuna steak per person you're preparing for, about a quarter cup of black sesame seeds per tuna steak, a cup of sushi rice. You might want to double this if you're doing it for more than 4 people, but a cup of sushi rice, 2.5 cups of water, 3 to 4 tablespoons of wine vinegar, 1 to 2 tablespoons of sugar, and about a half to a teaspoon of salt. You want 2 to 4 ripe mangoes, and you will know these ready when they're soft to the touch. A half a red onion, half a bell pepper, a lime, some cilantro, some salt, and some pepper. So the first thing we're going to do is prep the rice, because this is the thing that takes the most time and it has some time to just simmer on the stove. And the most important step of making sushi rice is to rinse it off, and you have to rinse it until the water runs clear. So we are going to run water through the rice, moving it around with our fingers. And so you start out just running the water through there. You're going to put it in that fine mesh strainer, and I keep a bowl underneath it just so that, first of all, the strainer is not touching the sink, and second of all, so that I can tell whether the water is clear or not. But as you can see, it's kind of got that starchiness in there, and if you are just running water through there and not moving it around with your fingers, then you're not going to see the starchiness as well. But every once in a while, you're going to want to pour that water out. Once the water gets cleaner, you're going to let the water fill up in that bowl and use the water to slosh the rice around a little bit. And that is just going to make sure where you're rubbing some of that starch off the outside of the rice. And it's going to take a while. This was like about a 5 to 10 minute process. Once the water is almost clear, you're going to switch over to your sprayer and start rinsing it off with the sprayer so that we can make sure that everything is rinsed off really well. And give it a final rinse. It is kind of hard to keep it in the strainer, and having a finer mesh strainer works well for this. Then you are going to put that into a saucepan with a lid and add your wet water in that you have measured. And then we are going to heat that up on the stove on high. I usually put this in the back burner because we're going to be using the front burner for your steaks later on. But heat that on high until it comes to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, you're going to turn that heat down to low. I usually stir it a little bit at this stage just to make sure it's not sticking to the bottom, because it is starch and it will stick pretty easily. And then we are going to throw that lid on there and let it cook for 6 to 8 minutes. Generally, you're going to want to check it at 6 minutes. And the way that you check it is you just take your wooden spoon and you're going to pull it off to the side. But do set a timer for this, because we're going to be multitasking and making your mango salsa while this is going on. So make sure you set your timer at this stage. So in order to check if it is absorbed, you're going to take a wooden spoon and just kind of pull the rice off to the side and look and make sure there's no water in the bottom. And if it is, you're just going to set that rice aside to cool. If it is not absorbed, continue to simmer it on low for 2 to 3 minutes until all that water is absorbed. And it kind of is going to depend on your stove. I have a gas stove and it's a food service grade one, so it does cook pretty quickly. So it might take closer to 8 minutes, especially if you have a flat top. So now we're going to be making our mango salsa. While your rice is cooking, go ahead and start this process. You're going to peel your mangoes. And like I mentioned earlier, in order to make sure these are nice and ripe, make sure that they kind of give a little bit when you poke them. And you are just going to peel those and then cut the fruit off the pit. The pit is the shape of the mango, just smaller. And it's sitting just in the same shape that the mango itself is inside. So just cut that fruit off the side of it with a large knife. And then I take a paring knife and just kind of peel off whatever fruit that I can. Now, the fruit that's close to the pit is kind of grainy and weird, and you'll be able to feel that. But get as much of the smooth fruit off of that pit as you can. Then we're going to dice it by placing a flat side of any of the pieces down and cutting that horizontally. And you can see me sliding the knife through there. It is slippery, so just be very, very careful with this. And then you are going to cut that into strips. So just cut straight down. The knife is going to work better if you're slicing down and forward at the same time. Knives work better at 2 directions at once. And like I mentioned, this stuff is slimy and slippery, so your knife is going to slip really easily. So then you're going to turn it 90 degrees and cut that into a dice. Keep those fingertips tucked to keep them out of the way. And then we are moving those into the bowl with a bench scraper. If you do not have one of these, go to the dollar store, get yourself a bench scraper. It is definitely worth it. You're going to dice the rest of those mangoes. You want about half a mango a person. So now we are going to cut our onion up. You're going to shave a little bit off the root end and then cut the little bit of the top off and then cut the onion in half through the root. Then we are going to... So you can see I'm cutting through the root. Then you're going to peel the outer layer off with your fingers so that the papery skin is off of it. And we're probably only going to use half of this onion, and whatever you have left you can use later. But make horizontal cuts, not cutting through the root, because that root is going to hold it together as we are cutting it. And normally if you're doing something like a chili or something, you would only do 2 to 3 cuts. You're going to do 5 to 6 cuts for this because you want these pieces to be little bitty. Then you are going to turn it 90 degrees and cut straight down towards the root, but not through it, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch apart once again. And then turn it 90 and cut straight down to make a dice. And you don't have to go all the way to the root for this because you're not going to be using a whole lot of this. And just set the rest of that onion aside for another recipe. You can definitely use it in something else. And you're going to be putting about 1/4 cup in there for now, but save the rest because there's a good chance that when you adjust your flavor, you might need a little bit more to punch up the flavor. It kind of depends. This onion ended up being pretty sharply flavored, so I didn't need any extra. But sometimes if it's a milder taste, you might. So then you're going to take your red bell pepper and cut the side off of it because we're not going to need a whole lot of it. And then you flatten it with the heel of your hand. And then you're just going to cut that into strips. And you want those strips to be about 1/4 inch wide. And then turn it 90 degrees and cut those into a dice. And reserve the rest of that pepper for another recipe. And peppers and onions freeze really well too, so that is something you can set aside. Once you freeze them though, you do want to use them in a cooked recipe. Then you're going to pull the leaves off about 10 stems of cilantro. And if you have that gene that makes cilantro taste soapy, you are more than welcome to leave this out. But you're going to pull those leaves off, and we are not using the stems of this. And then you just kind of run your knife through it in all directions until it's finely chopped. You just rock your knife as you're going through and keep your hand on the other end of the knife. And then we are going to add that cilantro in there. Then to juice your lime, you're going to roll it with the heel of your hand just to kind of loosen up the juice a little bit. And then cut it in half. And no, we do not have a juicer in this house. All you have to do is stab in there with a fork, rotate it around and squeeze, and that will work just fine for getting all the juice out of there. You do not need to buy a juicer. A fork works just fine. And about 1/2 a lime for the 2 mangoes would be fine. If you're using 4 mangoes, then I would use both halves for this recipe. Then you are going to stir everything together. And you can kind of look at it and tell if the amounts of the pepper and the onion look right and the cilantro, and see if it kind of looks like it's kind of evenly distributed. Then we're going to add some salt and pepper. You don't want to add a whole lot of salt, just enough to kind of brighten your flavors a little bit. But a little bit of black pepper is going to go a long way. Then the one part that a lot of people tend to forget is that they don't taste it. So taste it and see if the amount of onion, pepper, lime, and seasoning is right. And add more if you feel like it needs it so that you know that everything is correct. And now a word from our sponsors. Wait. I don't think we have any of those. If you would like to be a sponsor, we'd love to have you, but we're just kidding. We don't have any sponsors, so please subscribe. Hit that subscribe button right now. If you want to see more of what we do, we would love to have you, and we try to have videos out every week. So now we are going to be seasoning our sushi rice, and this is about the same way you would season sushi rice if you were going to make sushi. We would be getting this a lot cooler if you were making sushi, but because we are serving this in a little bit different way, I'm not really as worried about getting the rice cool. It's just a little side dish in this particular case. But you're going to add a couple tablespoons of sugar to your rice wine vinegar and a couple pinches of salt. And then we're just going to microwave this for 30 seconds and then stir up that sugar and salt in there until it gets dissolved. Then we are going to add this into your rice. So just pour it over top of there. And work it in with your wooden spoon. You do want to use a wooden spoon in this case because metal utensils can interact with the vinegar a little bit. And then just in the interest of trying to get this a little bit cooler, because you don't want this blazing hot with this particular way that we're serving things, you're going to want to get a wide bowl, and if you don't have a wooden one, a metal one will work, but wood works a little bit better. And you're going to put your rice in there and just work it around a little bit to try to make sure that that seasoning vinegar is worked through there, and that is going to help it cool off. So now we're going to be prepping our tuna, and this is something that's really important. If you are going to be cooking this rare, it has to be sashimi grade, meaning that it's been frozen to a really low temperature to kill any parasites that might be in it. Otherwise, if it's not sashimi grade, you have to cook it to 145. So that's really important. So we are coating these completely in sesame seeds, and so you're just going to press them down on the sesame seeds, and you press those sesame seeds into the tuna. Then you are going to turn your heat on high on the stove and add some neutral oil, like a vegetable or canola oil, into the pan. You can also use an avocado oil. And once it kind of heats up, you're going to add your tuna steaks into the pan. And the way you know it is ready to flip is you will see a little bit of white on the side that's closest to the pan, about 1/8 of an inch up the side. And once you see it getting white above that point, you are ready to flip. And it does not take very long at all, because we are just trying to get a little sear on the outside of this, and also to get those sesame seeds to stick. So then we are going to turn it over, and tongs work a little bit better to flip this than a spatula, and silicone coated tongs work even better than that. You're going to cook the second side, and it takes a little less time. And then you're going to use your tongs to hold it and sear each side of the steak so that that is cooked as well. And that doesn't take very long at all. You're just kind of cooking it until you see the white part. Then we're going to wipe your pan out with a paper towel before you cook any more steaks, or with a clean cloth. And then you just repeat for your next round. So add a little bit of neutral oil in there and keep on going. The first side is about 45 seconds. Second side was about 30. And then the sides, moving those around, was about 30 total for all three of the sides. So it does not take very long at all. We are just trying to get a little sear on the outside. Do have your ventilation fan on for this process, though. It does get smoky. So now we're going to plate. So you're going to press your rice into a rounded cup, and then turn that out onto the plate, and it is going to hold together really well because of it being that sushi rice and because we rinsed that starch off the outside. Then we are going to spoon some mango salsa on the side of the rice. Then we are going to take your tuna steak, and we are going to slice it thinly. and fan it out over top of the mango salsa. And then we're going to add a little bit more mango salsa on top of your rice and serve this with soy sauce. And it ends up being really pretty. This dish is one of my husband's favorites and one of my favorites. It's super fresh. It tends to be very impressive and would be a perfect date night. And it's less expensive if you're making it at home. And if you're having something at home, you get to spend more time with each other. This is just a reminder that we have our 2 membership levels that we would love to have you as a member of. This gives you early access to our videos, and we're hoping to do some lives soon once we get a few more members. And if you are not able to be a member, because I understand completely that finances are tight right now, we would love to just have you as a subscriber, and that lets you get notified whenever we have our videos coming out. And if you are thinking you might want to try this, please leave us a comment and let us know how it goes. We will see you next week.